Rock and roll, we're live.
We're live. We're back. The professor and the pastor. We're gonna talk about something really fun today.
Yeah.
We kind of hinted at last time. Toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity. Yeah, I think that's the topic. We went really general the first time, so we'll see how this one goes.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing I think about this whole format is like we didn't go, hey, I want to say this and you say that. Like this isn't pre-scripted. It's just kind of we're getting together. We kind of have a topic that maybe we've been thinking about a little bit, and we're just gonna go for it and see what happens. And I don't necessarily know what you think about all this stuff. You don't necessarily know what I think.
It's true.
So it'll be fun to kind of figure that out. I don't know. As I was thinking about this whole toxic masculinity thing, I started to think about kind of how I grew up. And I know even last time we talked about bullies and different things like that in our lives. And so there probably is something called toxic masculinity.
Interesting.
But I'm curious about, what you think about that. Because obviously martial arts.
Yeah.
Is that toxic masculinity because it's violence or whatever? So I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on that. Do you think there's something that really is toxic about masculinity? Or kind of what's your approach?
That's a good question. Should we define toxic masculinity, or at least a common popular definition of it? Or do you want to get to that later on through our chat?
Yeah, well, let's get to it later because I think it's really important to define it for sure.
Yeah, totally. So for me, as far as toxic masculinity, I totally think that, of course, a person can just be a bad person.
Right.
But we just call him a jerk. Right.
That's what when we were kids. Or something else.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's obviously that in every walk of life, whether it's a CEO of a company or a manager or an employee or, somewhere in your congregation or the guy picking on you at school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fighters that obviously are like that, or martial artists or whatever you want to call them. And then there's guys that are really nice and respectful and can still kick ass and take names. So I don't think my understanding of toxic masculinity and kind of how they define it today of basically being it's really interesting too, the things that they connect. So one of the terms that I've heard is this thing that they call a real man. And then a real man then by definition is someone that dominates other males and dominates females and keeps their place in the hierarchy of society.
So kind of this patriarchal alpha male kind of thing?
Yeah, what's funny, and I agree with there being something like a real man, but that's not how I would define that at all, which is funny because they're kind of linking toxic masculinity with a real man. And to me, that's totally degrading what I would consider, a quote unquote real man.
Yeah, and I look back and I kind of think about this because there's definitely guys, whether it was even in grade school or high school or even honestly later in life, like, in different employer kind of situations. Yeah. Even within the church, even pastors, some pastors, things like that, where I can look and go, yeah, that's not good. Like there's something not right about how that person either understands masculinity or their role or whatever. And I think it's really important to understand that probably all walks of life have this.
I would think so.
The bullies, the jerks, the people who kind of that view themselves as the alpha male or whatever that is. But yeah, so I can look back and go, no, I think that was wrong. But I think the problem comes when when society takes things that are kind of masculine, quote unquote masculine virtues, characteristics, and says, oh, okay, because you have any of those things in your life, now you're toxic.
Yeah.
And so it's like this feminizing of all of culture, and I think women should be women. I think there's something great about being feminine, but I'm not so sure we should take that and say, oh, well, men need to be feminine too. And so what's the distinction between what's feminine, what's masculine, and what's healthy masculinity. What is it? How would you define a real man? Since you kind of talked about it as maybe those things are being conflated. How would you define a real man?
Yeah, I mean, for me, they're completely different, and I don't even know what a real man is, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
For me, I think a good man would be what I would consider a real man.
Okay.
And so. But I think that some of that could be like being a protector, being a supporter, provider, being a good father, being a leader. Things like that are really what I think of, and then there's that other side of it too, especially when I was growing up, like a real man also was someone that kind of was quote unquote masculine. So like if your fence broke, they could fix the fence, right? If your tire blew, you could change the tire. Things like that. Kind of having some level, I guess, of self-sufficiency and kind of like the old cowboy. When I think of real man, I think like a cowboy, right? He could.
Boy, you're getting all kinds of toxic here now.
I know, man. I know. I'm probably microaggressing. So, they could ride a horse and they could fix a fence and they were just kind of like tough old leathered guys.
Yeah.
And I don't think all those things are required to be a good man, just to kind of be clear. Because there are some men maybe that don't have really good mechanical skills, things like that. But I still think that a lot of them could.
Right.
And I think it's more of a decision or a choice or the way that they grew up.
Right.
I grew up in a household where my dad kind of was a real man. And then, as a child, because he grew up in Illinois on a farm, and his brothers and his sisters and his siblings and his dad were kind of like those real men. And then he decided to go the other route and was an athlete as a child, but then later on was just an intellectual. So he was an electronic engineer and was a really good athlete as a child, but kind of quit all that for whatever reason. And I think, honestly, just out of sheer laziness, didn't want to fix the fence or change the tire on the car. But he did have that ability.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, because of our relationship with him, that was never passed on to me.
Interesting.
So I didn't become a real man until, I started doing martial arts. We've talked about this before. And now I had some mentors and leaders that then they're like, what do you mean you don't know how to build a fire? Okay, well, we're going camping this weekend. I'm going to teach you. It's almost like
you could build a fire.
Yeah. If you kind of like the Boy Scouts in the military, and in a martial arts scenario, like Mr. Miyagi, all wrapped up in one. That was basically my childhood. So starting at 14.
Mr. Miyagi was a real man.
He was a real man.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a real man, 100%. Right, as a leader or a mentor, he could defend himself.
And maybe that's the difference between. Maybe this would be a good time to start thinking about, what is toxic masculinity? Because I think there are things that are masculine, kind of at least are viewed that way historically. Things like being physical, risk taking, aggressiveness. Like those are things that are kind of traditional characteristics of what men are and on some level. And I think there are different ways to take risk, right? Like you can take financial risks, right? And a man might be more willing to do that. Not that a woman couldn't do that, and that's not the point.
Yeah.
But it seems like men are a little bit more willing often to take some risks, and women tend to, and this is getting all kinds of traditional, whatever, send your emails to him.
It's John Byrne at...
Yeah. But women have kind of this nurturing side to them in a way that I think men don't.
Absolutely.
And men have this risk-taking, more tough side to them that in a way that women don't. And I think both are really good, can be really good and positive. And you look at martial arts is violent. It's punching people, putting them in holds, making them submit, and so some people might even look at martial arts and go, well, that's toxic masculinity because 100%. It's violent, But there's some virtuous sides of those things, isn't there?
I think so, absolutely. If you think about how we've grown up as a society through the ages, in general, men were protectors, right? Yeah. And you know, of course, you have famous female Joan of Arcs and, you know, just things that very powerful women. Absolutely. But in general, if you just look at, you know, take the muscle to fat ratio, the height, the weight. Again, hey, I'm a little guy, so I can say that. So, but if you know, but most men are generally more testosterone. Right. You know, hormone levels are bigger, muscle mass is bigger. They're able to exert more force with their muscles. They're larger humans. All those things. I mean, they're designed basically to be the warriors of society, right? In my opinion. And again, it doesn't mean you can't flip. So of course, you're going to get a male that could be the scholar or the person that, you know, tans the hides and makes the meals and preps the tribe. Sure. But in general, right? So percentiles, right?
Those are biological differences 100%. That are pretty much, they're undeniable.
Well, I would agree with that, but there would be a lot of people that would argue with me. But I would say they're undeniable. Yeah. And again, we're talking percentiles, right? Right. So like you would say, the percentage of dogs have 4 legs. Right. Are there dogs with 3 legs? Yes. Yes. Yeah, there's a couple that are born that way, right? Yeah. Or they lose their leg or whatever. But in general, you would say a dog has 4 legs. Right. And I would say in general, men, they have more testosterone. They are more aggressive. And biologically, they're designed to be that way. Yeah. That's by design.
And you even talk about like protectors. Yeah. And again, that's kind of a traditional view of men that your role is to protect. You even mentioned provide. I agree with that. You know, I think on some level, and not that it can't be reversed. I've got friends where they're kind of stay-at-home dad and mom, you know, the wife provides because she's got certain skills that are marketable or whatever. That's not necessarily what.
So if my wife wants to become a sugar mama at any time, I'm ready.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Mine too, man. Maybe your wife and my wife can go start a business. We can just chill.
Just hang out. We'll just do podcasts all day.
That's right.
Train and do podcasts.
Yes, I like that. I like that idea. But there is that. I think some of those are traditional values, and maybe that goes back to a time when, you know, the world was different, right? Like some of the skills that men had, or the physiological differences that men had, made them more capable of providing on some level because of farming and the hard work. It is not that women can't farm or anything like that, but maybe it goes back to that. I don't know, but I think that those are things that men often find their identity in their ability to fulfill those roles. And when that starts getting taken away from them, I think oftentimes they'll lash out. They get frustrated.
I agree. I think as our society goes more and more feminine based, and I think that is what's happening. I think more and more teachers are becoming female, and then I think being more of a female driven subset of society. Yeah. So basically education. The men then that are getting into it are more like that. So you're not going to get this ultra alpha male that's generally a school teacher. Right. You're going to get a more feminine male in general.
And that's a percentage thing too. Like you go look at, especially elementary school teachers, right? Yes. Like there are some men elementary teachers, but there's not a lot.
Not a lot. And the ones that are very docile, in my opinion, docile. I hate to use the word beta, but they're more of what you would consider a beta versus a super alpha.
They have a nurturing kind of
absolutely
aspect to how they view things.
Absolutely. And then I think it's interesting because because I was primarily raised by my mother versus my father, that I was so lucky to get male mentors, because I grew up in where it was like aggression. My mom didn't like aggression. She was a mom. So it was like, you know, when me and my brother were like, pom, pom, pom. No, oh my gosh, you're going to kill each other. Whereas like you're talking about males, that's just kind of what they do. Right. You know, it's just like if you put 2 little lion cubs together, they're going to play fight. Right. Because they have to do that to be able to survive in the wild. Right. And generally male children do that more than female children. And I think that's something that's okay. And so I think now when you propagate that against a larger society, like an entire elementary school, so it's not just one family, it's 500 families. Now you get every time little Johnny does anything that's considered aggressive, which to me is just typical male behavior, they get in trouble for it. Yeah. And so now you've got building blocks of society happening every day, especially because kids spend just as much time at school as they do at home. So now they're getting reinforced with these like feminine virtues.
Well, and I think you brought up school, and I think that's super important too, because school seems to be a place that's kind of set up for the learning style of a female.
Oh, interesting. I never thought about that, actually.
In the sense that, my son Joe, and he's like little hyper dude, right? Like
Yes.
I was watching his basketball game the other day, and he just ended his basketball season, and he was in the huddle, and during a timeout or halftime, I don't remember what it was, but some kind of timeout or something. And he literally just started like jumping. He's like jumping in the huddle and like wiggling his arms, and it was just hilarious. But he's just kind of a hyper dude. Like he's constant energy. And
are they calling him ADD or anything crazy like that?
No, but the coach did. I should say this.
I don't want to get way off topic, but
no, but I think this plays in. A few years ago, his elementary school teacher wanted us to get him tested for some learning disabilities and different things like that, and I literally said, no way, we're not testing.
Good for you.
Because if it was really bad, if there was like these huge things that I went, man, there's something really wrong, then we might have done it. But I was afraid of him getting these labels that he would then use as excuses to misbehave.
God forbid they prescribed him drugs too, I mean, brain development at that age is so key, and now you're giving him all these weird drugs.
And by the way, A's and B's.
Nice.
A's and B's.
Awesome.
At school. So he's doing great. But I think that plays into it, right? I think the education system is set up in a very feminine way, sit in your desk, listen to lectures, take notes, all these kinds of things. And I think that boys need that physical interaction with what they're learning. They need gym class. They need to get hit in the head with a dodgeball. Like, they need to kind of go through that a little bit, and the pecking order's got to be figured out. That's just a real thing. And if you create this environment where none of that can be done, I think it actually hurts masculinity. Now, I'm not saying you should let fights go in the hallways or anything like that, but there's a place for that physical, risk-taking kind of personality and those characteristics to be encouraged. And I think about, you talk about warriors.
Yes.
Can you imagine a bunch of Navy SEALs who aren't willing to take risks?
I know a lot of Navy SEALs we talked about last time. No, I can't go 5 minutes without those guys trying to get me in trouble.
Yeah, right.
So the first thing they want to do when they're off base, like they get back from overseas or whatever, they're like, "What are you doing? Hey, you want to go skydiving?" I'm like, "You've been in the country for like 2 days, bro." "Well, yeah, I'm bored. Let's go skydiving."
Yeah.
And that's and then I'm like, "Okay, see you later." As they, ride away on their street bike at Mach 12, right? I mean, that's just, their level of norm where we're here is, like here. So, yeah, absolutely. And that's how they protect our country. So.
Well, and that's the thing is I would never want to send somebody off to protect me, to protect this country or whatever, my home, anything, if they didn't have that risk-taking aggressiveness that might be necessary to defend,
absolutely,
to fight.
Absolutely.
And I just think that's so important. And we're losing a lot of that toughness and a lot of that risk-taking.
Yeah, I heard a story. Who was it? This is a really interesting story. Who was it that was telling me this story? I don't remember, but they were talking about, they now have changed the standard, because one of the standards for, I don't remember if it was Army or Marines or whatever, was you had to throw a grenade X amount of yards.
Okay.
So they're finding now that they actually have to change the standards. And it's not because there's not enough people that want to join the military. There's as many people as ever. They're unqualified. They can't. So they're getting in there, and one of their tests is they have to throw this grenade X amount of yards. The men can't do it.
Right.
And basically their thought is because they're not growing up, learning how to play sports, being athletic, being, little boys, and so their dad's not playing, like pitch with them, and they're not tossing the ball around and stuff like that. They're not playing catch. And so literally it's like they're throwing now at what the female standard was like 10 years ago, which is pretty wild when you think about that. So they're actually considering lowering the standards of that so that way people pass.
Man.
Pretty wild, right?
That's scary, because where does that end?
I don't know. I'm telling you what, if someone needs to drag me out of a building, I want the dude that can do it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want the guy that they can't pick me up.
Yeah. Or for that matter, the woman that can do it, but she better be able to do it.
100%. Yeah. Hey, and I'm down, man. If you got, what's her name? Gabby Garcia. You got Gabby Garcia. She'll throw me up on the shoulder, man, and run up those stairs.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. But, oh, man, that is scary. And I think that, I guess where the toxic masculinity comes into play. I mean, there was the whole Me Too movement thing and, the hashtag Me Too and all of that. And obviously there are wrong expressions of some of these characteristics, being aggressive or sexually violent or
absolutely.
Obviously, I mean, it's obviously like anybody who argues that that's not bad expressions of whatever,
of course,
they're morons and idiots and bad things should be done to them. Right?
Absolutely.
So I think we can all agree on that, but when it's kind of that throw the baby out with the bathwater thing, it's if we just say, well, aggression of all kinds is bad, well, then who's going to protect us? Aggression of all kinds is bad. So, when a woman is walking downtown Denver, close to where we live at night, and, who does she want with her? Does she want somebody who can defend her, who can, somebody comes up and tries to do something bad that knows how to do that, or at least has the aggressive characteristics that haven't been oppressed in order to be able to try to defend her. I would think she might want somebody who could do that or is willing to try at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the thing is funny. Before I met my wife, I actually dated like a lot of tall women, like 5'11", 6 foot women, and I'm a little guy. And it was really funny because one of the things they'd always say to me is like, "Wow, you know what I really like about you? That I feel safe around you."
Yeah.
It's funny because you'd see her and me like walking, right? And it was, again, I'm not a hyper aggressive person. I think most people that meet me would actually say probably the opposite, but 100% I can defend myself. And I think that is through being a real man, so to speak, learning to be aggressive when I was a child, to be athletic, to be able to assert myself. And I don't know if I want to call it dominant, but to be at least not subordinate. And I think that's really, a smart distinction that people don't really make.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because you talk about some of those things and this plays itself out, I think, in even the sports world a little bit. I don't know if you're a football fan or not. I kind of like football. I grew up playing football, played football through high school, had a couple concussions and the whole deal, I mean, it was, but now I look back and I go, the guys that were really good at football were really aggressive. And I think football is an outlet for that, and it's a really good outlet. I'm just curious about your views on, because football is kind of, you've got a lot of people going, oh, we shouldn't even play in football and all this stuff. I'm kind of, what do you think about that stuff? Because that's a kind of a place where I think that's kind of a masculine game. It's violent in some ways, and is that how is culture dealing with that? Do you think that's okay? Do you think football's bad, good? What's your...
Yeah, I think there's some interesting stuff coming out about CT and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I also think that a lot of that gets hyper attention sometimes. And, I work with fighters every day. They get hit in the head. And is there some concussions? For sure. Mm-hmm. But I think that compared to some of the other things that you could have happen to you in life is probably the lesser of two evils. We kind of talked about this a little bit before. Like we get hurt in class, whatever. We get a twisted ankle, we get a twisted knee. But just imagine what that would be with no training.
Right.
Because I see people all the time. They trip down the stairs, they slip off a curb, they slip on ice, and break their tailbone, whatever. And without that athletic, and core strength and all those other things, it seems like if you were to probably just take a 20-year span of, okay, this guy does zero athletic things.
Right.
20-year span of all their injuries and the severity of injuries versus, hey, this person is an athlete in great condition, 20-year, all injuries and severity of injuries. I mean, I would take the person that's the athlete, versus this.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think that you look and we get guys coming to the gym all the time who, you know, out of weight or overweight, you know, out of shape. And even this was me too. When I first started doing some martial arts and stuff, like I was significantly overweight and I got hurt a lot. Like I was always fighting through something because I was so my knees hurt, I was pulling muscles, just all kind. Not that I don't have any pain now. I certainly do. I'm putting rolls of tape on my body before class a lot of times, but you know, but those things are less severe in a lot of ways.
Yes. And
I feel like my body its longevity will be better
absolutely
in the long run because I'm taking care of it now. But there's risk involved with that, right? Like I can get hurt. I could get a concussion. I have gotten, I've gotten hit above the eye and bled. I've rolled my ankle, and you've probably done all kinds of stuff. I don't know your injury history.
All kinds, yeah.
But there's risk involved with that, and I think when it comes to things like football, and those kinds of things, there's kind of this balance of making it as safe as we can without totally taking all risk out of it. All these rules, honestly, and it doesn't have to be about football, but all these rules. Quarterback. I played quarterback in high school a little bit, so so I get that position, and I get getting hit and the vulnerability of it. But sometimes I feel like, man, we're just making it. You don't even have to be tough anymore.
Yeah, kind of losing what it is to be a football player.
Yeah, like and we take all those things out of sports. We don't play dodgeball in school. Why? Well, somebody might get hit in the head with the dodgeball. Okay, stuff happens, man. Like going through the injuries and the pain and the hurts is part of how you learn to be tough. It's part of how you learn to manage risk. It's part of how you learn to to think about the world around you. All those kinds of things. I don't know if you know this. This might be interesting. I just thought of this. There's a while ago, maybe a year ago, I ran across this article. In the UK, they started to have playgrounds that had dangerous items in them.
What would be a dangerous item?
Anything from like saws, like hand saws, to like yeah, you're right.
Okay.
To like bricks and pieces of wood.
Okay.
And stuff like that. And they were beginning to let kids play in these areas.
That's crazy.
Because what they found was that kids needed to have that risk, and they might make a mistake, they might hurt themselves. Now they wouldn't just let them go by themselves. Yeah. It'd be supervised, but they would learn.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily promoting that. I'm just saying they did it. So
yeah,
I think it's an interesting reaction to maybe some of the stuff that's been going on.
I do too.
Yeah, so I think it's played out in culture in a lot of ways. Whether it's football or sports or whatever, like the risk being taken out of things. I think risk is really good. I think aggressiveness, when nurtured and managed properly, is really good. I told my son one time, several times, I said, look, you ever start a fight, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You ever have to put an end to one? I'm kind of okay with that. Like there's an ability to manage it and go, it's not okay to be a jerk and a bully and all those kinds of things. It is okay to use those things to protect and to defend, I think. But how do you see when you talk about when you think about or toxic masculinity? Are there ways? What are some of the ways that you see, especially in martial arts and those kinds of areas, that you see men exercising some of those characteristics in really negative ways?
I mean, I see it all the time. I see it in everything. I see, you get people that are. They can't control their emotions. They get angry. They try to hurt people. In the greater scope of things, you see like the Mayweathers and the guys like that are just like basically doing everything wrong. Right? I mean, they're just jerks. They talk poorly to people. They treat people poorly. They're hyper aggressive to reporters, to other people, to I think even a couple of them don't know what happened with the charges, but have even had domestic violence charges. And again, like we talked about before, obviously we're not saying that's okay. you know, obviously violence and domestic violence and anything assault towards a female. No one thinks that's good. If anyone thinks that's good, they're just a psycho. So I don't think we're talking about that. But there are times when that happens. But again, I wouldn't link that with masculinity or toxic masculinity. I think that's just a symptom of that person just having problems.
Right.
And I think women can have the same thing. I mean, there's multiple. What was the lady with John Benet Ramsey, right? And they did all the weird stuff with that kid, that child, poor child, and the lady.
I thought you were gonna mention what's her name, Bobbitt or whatever.
Yeah, Lorena Bobbitt. Yeah, Lorena Bobbitt. Yeah, yeah. I mean, what's that toxic femininity? I mean, that lady just snapped and was crazy and did something horrible to another human being.
Right.
And the lady that drowned those kids or whatever, I don't remember.
Drowned her own kids in the bathtub. Or is that?
I don't remember exactly the case, but so there's just bad people out there, I think. And I think the interesting thing is when they talk about so I looked up toxic I didn't spend a lot of time, but and so they call it, I think, hegemonic masculinity.
Yeah.
And then so I was like, well, what's hegemony? And then so I looked that up, and then they talk about cultural hegemony, and what that is. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I probably sound like a moron, but that's okay. I'm not that smart anyway. And so when when that's like basically cultural dominance, but specifically with the people that lead that society. And, so like Caesar or, a political leader or something like that. And then basically that their ideals and thoughts and behaviors kind of move down throughout society, throughout the hierarchy of society, basically from the top down. And I think that's the argument with toxic masculinity, is that the people, AKA the toxic men, are trying to push that aggressive behavior and dominate throughout the entire stratus of society, which I think, if anything, it's just the opposite. And, men are really being kind of trying to be controlled at this point as far as being able to express themselves.
The pendulum swung the other way.
Yeah, it swung the other way a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's really true. I think it's not so much that, because there's always been, right? There's always been. If you're gonna say, toxic masculinity, well, the term might be recent. The reality that there's always been bad men, just like there's been bad women. They just always has been. They're always going to be part of society, and I think that. I was thinking about this. I'm a pastor, so I think about this biblically a lot. And I go back, I look at Samson, and man, he was a bad dude in some ways. I look at David, who's kind of a hero in a lot of ways, but he was a bad dude in some ways. And you can kind of go through a lot of these, even the heroes of Scripture. You find these guys, right, and they have these characteristics, and they take some of the masculine things of the ones that are men, and there's some great female heroes as well, but the ones that are men, and they exercise those in really bad ways. And I just go, this isn't new. This has been around for forever. It's probably not going away. There's bad women, there's bad men. I think the thing that I struggle with the most is this, that the word toxic masculinity is linked, instead of just saying, hey, there's toxic behavior.
Absolutely.
Or there's toxic, linking it with something else. Now we don't really have toxic femininity, for example. You kind of mentioned that earlier. But we have toxic masculinity. So I'm saying, wait a minute. Like, isn't there good masculinity?
Absolutely.
And so it's so frustrating to see, and I experienced it, and I'm sure you have too. You spend any amount of time around, especially guys that are just a bunch of guys. Like, you're gonna find some, and there's gonna be behavior that's probably not good, that kind of stuff. Hopefully it's managed on some level, but it's always going to be there. And I think my biggest complaint is that our culture has shifted so far to the other side that now just being masculine at all is almost viewed bad. Like, you're a man, you're bad. And the Me Too movement was really, I think, good in some ways, because it brought to light some really significant problems in a lot of areas of society with in regards to this. But that also went too far, in my opinion. And that also, all of a sudden, you had people going Me Too because somebody once told a dirty joke in front of them, and it's like, I'm like, okay, that wasn't, okay, you were offended, but that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
You weren't abused.
Yeah.
And there's a difference, and obviously many of those people were abused, so I don't want to belittle that. But,
of course. Yeah, that's real, and of course we care about them. Like, those people need to be heard.
Yeah.
But like you said, then you have the other person, right? That, well, you might as well wrap yourself in bubble wrap and never leave your house.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you're a man, so you're too aggressive. Oh, okay, I guess. I mean, I don't know what's too aggressive. Where's that line drawn? I think there's some place where you can go, okay, obviously you passed the line somewhere before you got here, but where that is exactly, I think that becomes difficult. And you've got culture kind of saying, all these you talked about microaggressions earlier. Yeah. I always tell people I don't microaggress, I macroaggress.
Nice. Perfect.
So if I'm being aggressive, you'll know it.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be on purpose.
It'll be on purpose and intentional. If you think it's a microaggression, trust me, I wasn't trying to be aggressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like exactly what you said, and I think that is the key. Toxic masculinity. Like, why do those even have to be linked in any? It's just toxic behavior, toxic personality, toxic person, whatever it is. It has nothing to do with masculinity. Masculinity is just masculinity, and that's just what it is. But right. I don't see how you could even link those two, because again, if you swing it either way, I mean, a female could say something belittling to a male and vice versa.
All the time.
Sure. For sure. Absolutely. And vice versa. So why would you even link those two together? It's totally bizarre. It's almost like the microaggression thing. Again, I don't want to get off topic, but how does that, what is a micro, like, how do you link those two?
Right.
No, you're either aggressing me or like you're not, right? So
aggression by its nature isn't micro.
So it's just so, again, it's almost like putting these two things together that don't even match, but somehow people are trying to make them match, and it makes it even weirder to me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like microaggression, toxic masculinity. Okay, just take one of those away. Hey, man, you're being aggressive towards me. Cool. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Or hey, you're being toxic. You're being like a toxic person. That makes sense.
Right.
But when we start linking these things together, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. You're toxic because you're masculine. Wait, what?
Yeah, it's bizarre.
There's a healthy masculinity, and that's what we should lift up. The Gillette commercial. Did you remember the Gillette commercial? Did you watch it?
I did. I'm trying to think of what it was. I remember what they basically, I just saw it on Facebook.
Yeah.
And, of course.
I had to look it up too, because I didn't.
And I just remember a lot of people going, congratulations, Gillette. You just lost like $10 billion in business this year.
Right.
But I don't remember. Maybe you can remind me of what it was all about.
Well, it's been a while since I saw it, but I looked it up right at, kind of when everybody was making a big deal out of it. Yeah. I'm like, what did they do? But here's the funny thing about the Gillette commercial is, I think at most times in history, people wouldn't have thought twice about it. I watched it and I actually kind of was like, okay, like I didn't really understand what the big deal was, because when I watched it, I saw a bunch of dads, kind of with their kids going, hey, bullying's not okay. Right. Bullying's not okay. I think we can agree on that. Nobody thinks bullying is okay. And so it was kind of this, kind of that whole thing, but I think we need like one of those studio guys. We can just put it up, okay, so we can watch it and then we can talk about it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I would be curious. So it's a bunch of dads with their kids bullying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember in detail, but there were kind of these messages that seemed to watch it. Yeah, that seemed to be like, these things aren't okay. And quite, I use a Gillette razor, so I still use a Gillette razor. I watched the commercial and I thought to myself, I went, okay, at a different point in time where people weren't making this big deal out of toxic masculinity, where the word toxic and the word masculine weren't linked in this way that I think is really unhealthy, nobody would have thought twice about it.
So was it an anti-toxic masculinity commercial, or was it a pro-masculinity commercial, or what was it?
Yeah, it was. I think the intent behind it was kind of this anti-toxic masculinity thing. But then some people took it as you're condemning me because I'm a man kind of thing. You're condemning these masculine characteristics.
Gotcha.
And it was, I just found the
so
response
almost had swung too far again.
Maybe a little bit, but,
gotcha.
But I was more interested in the response that people had to it, because they were all of a sudden, you had people like friends of mine who are like, "Oh, Gillette! I hate Gillette now. I'm never using Gillette again." And
Dollar Shave Club, here I come.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
By the way, Gillette or Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah, if you guys want to sponsor us, we're 100% open to that.
Exactly. But they had this severe reaction.
Oh, interesting.
And I think a lot of it is because of that.
Did you feel that the characteristics, behaviors, or whatever they're portraying in the commercial were toxic, or were they just masculine?
I think the message was pretty good.
Okay.
Pretty.
So the boys are being little jerks,
or at least, yeah. I mean, they didn't portray them being bullies necessarily that I remember, but they definitely addressed this kind of bullying behavior and kind of say, "Hey, that's not okay."
Gotcha.
And I just kind of, I guess my thought was, I thought the commercial was fine. Like I didn't have any issues with it. I'm not going to stop using Gillette. I'm not necessarily defending Gillette. I don't know everything behind it, and some people had more of a problem with it than I did. But I just think it was anti-toxic masculinity, whatever that is. Well, we kind of talked about what it is, but I didn't feel like it belittled masculine behavior in general.
Just a sub portion of it, like the bullying, things like that. Things that again just is unacceptable behavior.
Yeah, and I guess my point is this: that the words toxic masculinity have created now this battle. Yeah, like between people that, now everybody's jumping off one side or the other and going,
gotcha,
and going, hey, toxic masculinity is, horrible and it's everywhere and we got to stamp it down. And so, they're kind of on that side. And then the other people who are like anything that addresses any character flaw in masculinity at all is now stupid and dumb, and everybody should ignore it and fight against it. And so now you've got this great division. I think there's somewhere in between that we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's what happens though when you create these oil and water combinations. I think that really shouldn't be mixed.
Right.
You're gonna split it somewhere. And unfortunately, I think you push people further on the polar opposite, rather than just say, "Hey, it's like in any bell curve, in society. Like, hey, you're going to have a couple little standard deviations over here, and the percentage of the population is here." But I think when you do this weird combination of things, like toxic masculinity, you split that bell. Excuse me if I just bumped the mic, right down the middle, and then polar opposite, and really push these guys further, where they almost feel like they have to take a hard stance on something, even if it's unreasonable.
Let me circle this around. No, I think this would be good. Let me circle this around and bring it back to kind of what you do for a living, what I do for a living.
Yeah, sure.
How do you view martial arts and the role that can play in helping kids and even full-grown men develop a healthy view of masculinity?
Man, I think it's so important. Again, I'm going to go back to what we talked about earlier, where I never had a father, that played catch with me. We never went out and tossed the football or the baseball or whatever. I mean, we did nothing like that. And my mother was not an athlete. She was a very mom, feminine person. And so she didn't do that with me. And so I missed and they didn't push me into sports. So I missed a huge part of that. And playing rough house with my brother, things that I think a boy should explore. And so I didn't get any of that until I came into martial arts. And it's really interesting. When I was in college, I did a lot of studying and science. I was just more of a scientist, and I don't remember the specific studies. I wish I could cite them offhand. But they've done studies with children, and in general, young males, just by the nature of genetics, if you want to call it genetics, but basically they will play, if you put a truck and a doll, they'll play with the truck.
Right.
And they'll also, they'll actually play in a greater expanse of area. A female actually will play in a smaller expanse of area.
Interesting.
They will generally, females will play, again, this is obviously unsolicited, more of social games.
Right.
Males will play more of physical games.
Right.
And so they've done all these studies where they basically put them in a room like this with nothing in it, but these things basically to attract certain attention, and then they put them in a larger room and see, okay, well, the female child only uses this little part of the corner, and the male's like cruising the whole room, this giant room.
Right.
And so basically they're saying that that's just by predisposition. So back to my story. So I didn't get any of that as a child, though.
Right.
And so I didn't get any feedback system into that. I didn't get any promotion of those male traits until I went into martial arts. And thank God I did, because then I became an athlete and I became much more confident. And the funny thing is all the bullying stopped. And I think a lot of that was kind of not having the ability to release that aggression, having that ability to express myself, because I was never really taught it was right.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And I think that's one thing martial arts can really do for people is, especially for people like me. I had a boy recently that came in and he's with a single mother. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I could see so much of myself in you. He's a smart kid. He's actually really athletic. He's smaller, but he's one of our better students. And he has a lot of potential in martial arts, but he's a wreck mentally. And I think a lot of that is like he doesn't know how to, and especially when he gets the most insecure is when he gets pushed in class.
Right.
And so it's because I think he doesn't understand how to, like when something aggressive happens, like we're just trying to push him to like hit harder or expend more energy. He actually kind of freaks him out a little bit.
Back.
He's a little too close to the edge for his comfort zone. And man, I'm like, if you had a more masculine influence in your life, and we could be that masculine influence, martial arts could, to be able to promote that side of you that's going to make you a more well-rounded human being. And I think that's what's so awesome about martial arts is if you don't have that outlet somewhere else, it can be a pretty good conduit to give it, because that's what it gave me. That conduit to be able to understand aggression and realize, hey, it's not all bad. Be able to harness my own anger. Right. I had a lot of anger and harness it in a positive manner. So I'm not maybe beating up a kid at school, but I'm beating up a bag, or a focus mitt or a tie pad, whatever it is, in the academy, in the gym. So I think it can do a lot of those things, and then show them also a positive male. Maybe they don't have a positive male in their life, but that is masculine and can, if they want to, be aggressive. Right. But not to the point of where it is a toxic behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's what I feel about martial arts.
Yeah. Well, and the discipline too, I think that is so important, and I think that helps them discern. I've at times been around the kids program at our gym a little bit, and I love that, I know there's been times where kids have started to use those in a bullying kind of way, and like that's not acceptable at the gym, and that's put an end to. If that story ever reaches, the people at the gym, they're like, nope.
Absolutely.
You can never do that. You can never do that. And we're certainly not going to train you if you're going to do that. That kind of stuff. And I know that's happened in the past it doesn't happen all the time, but it's certainly happened. Yeah. And I think too, from my perspective, and again, we have a little bit of a similar story in the sense that I had multiple dads throughout my life. And so I didn't have that consistent influence from a dad. And so my mom basically raised me with some dad type figures along the way. It gets complicated. But anyways, and so I always look back, and even when I was playing football and stuff, and wished I would have had a dad at the time that knew how to really help me with appropriate levels of aggression, because I was an okay football player. I wasn't great. I probably had enough talent to be better than I was, and I wasn't going to ever be a superstar, but I probably had enough talent to be better than I was if I could have understood that. Like, when is it okay to be aggressive? When is it okay and when's it not okay? And how do you do that? How do you be aggressive in one moment and then be, a good man of character in the next? And or really in both moments, because you can be a good man of character and have aggression in the right moments. And I think that when it comes to my faith and being a pastor, I actually look back, and people they have these views of Jesus, and he's like this passive, meek and mild, like they almost make
sometimes.
Sometimes. Right. And then there's those moments where he like flips the tables and in the temple and goes after guys and like physically he's flipping tables. He's acting out aggressively physically. And I think, well, yeah, okay. You forget about those passages because you like the meek and mild Jesus, who they almost make him feminine. But when you read the Gospels and the confrontations he has with the religious leaders at the time, you read the portrayal of him in the Book of Revelation, and all these things, and he's meek and mild when he should be meek and mild, but he's aggressive when he should be aggressive. And I think that's a healthy understanding of masculinity is going, there are times to be aggressive in the right ways for the right reasons. And then there are times where being meek and mild and all those other things can be very masculine when done in the right way. And so I think that's kind of, when I think about masculinity in the church, I go, man, we need to help men be men. So we did something last year. We had a men's event called Guns and Grub.
Oh, nice! I love it.
So we went up to the mountains. We shot a bunch of guns and had a good time. And then we went out and ate chicken wings, and it was great. And it was kind of this, hey man, we're not that women can't shoot guns. I mean, my daughter knows how to shoot a gun. My wife knows how to shoot a gun.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm all for that. And some of the women were mad. They're like, hey, well, we want to do that. And so I was like, well, you guys can do gals, guns, and grub or something,
Yeah.
And you guys can have whatever. But it was really an outlet. It was one of the best events we did because it was really an outlet for a lot of the men in our church to go do something that's kind of generally viewed as a masculine thing to do in a really safe way and have a lot of fun and uplift. Hey, being a man is good when it's done right.
Yeah, giving a little bit of validity to it's not necessarily bad. And that's the thing too with the man, it's bad to be a man sometimes these days with the toxic masculinity thing. And I'm doing an event, speaking of that, just reminded me of an event I'm doing at the end of this month called Man Day.
Oh, nice.
And it's in Oklahoma. It's in Enid, I don't know if that's pronounced right.
Is this that car thing you guys
Yes, it's the car thing.
Nice.
Yeah, Man Day, and it's in Oklahoma, and basically it's only men, and we go out and we shoot guns.
Nice.
And we blow stuff up and we race cars, and we do what we'll call a pond race. So it's basically like if you picture there's a pond and then a racetrack around it made out of dirt with jumps and hitting other people is 100% encouraged. And the way we get these cars is we buy a cheap car, we fix it up. And so my friend Sean Stanifer, which he fixed these cars up, and first thing he does is we get out there and he gets the Sawzall and he cuts the muffler. He goes, "This doesn't sound like a car." So we're in there with the Sawzall underneath this car, and he
cut the exhaust
cuts the exhaust right off. So now it's like, I'm like, he's like, okay, now it sounds like a car. And then we paint him and cool and stuff like that. Yeah. But then we take him to Oklahoma and we put him up for auction.
Nice.
And all the money from the auction, all the proceeds go to build wells in Nigeria, wells and churches actually.
Awesome.
In Nigeria.
Awesome.
Because there's a lack of fresh water there. And so it's really cool because we get to give back to a charity, but we get to be men. And it's kind of nice to go have a weekend retreat without wives, and you can kind of really express your masculinity.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about being aggressive. You get to blow stuff up. And again, it's just like a boy, you know what I mean? Going out and letting, their wiggles out. Like you said, your boy's a little wiggly. But and allow him to be that person. And then, hey, man, if you allow that, wow, well, what a more productive member of society. So anyway, that's a cool event. That reminded me of the event that you just told me about. Pretty similar. Yeah,
well, and that's cool because you're taking proceeds and you're really doing something that's really beneficial for society as a whole.
Yeah.
By being men.
Absolutely. And I think anyone that were to see any of that, so if I were to just show you like 10 pictures from Man Day, someone that was against toxic masculinity would be on fire. I'm sure they would not be happy about what was going on out there. But, then you see the other side of the story. Like, hey, actually, these are good people.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do something for a good cause. And just so happens we get to have a good time and, throw out some masculinity while we do it.
Awesome. That's sweet. Hey, we got to wrap this up.
Awesome.
Part because I got to go get my little man from school.
Perfect.
But we got something planned for next week, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, we're bringing in Ben Pexton, which is another student at the academy. And yeah, so he's a pretty amazing person. He's recently lost the use of his legs. So I don't want to give away the whole story, but he's an amazing human being, and he's cruising around in his wheelchair, and he'll be back to hitting mitts actually probably early next week. So I'll probably do a session. Yeah. He's been cleared for spinal mobility now.
Can we get some video of that? That would be super awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll come and record it.
I'm sure he'll be pretty excited. It'll be his first time hitting mitts again for a while. So we're gonna hit mitts and then cruise over here and we'll do a podcast.
Oh man, that would be phenomenal. So don't miss that because that's gonna be amazing. And we got something planned for a week after that too. And maybe we'll tell you guys about it next week.
Oh, sweet.
So we don't need it. We don't have to give everything away.
No, we can't.
But we got a couple really cool things coming up. So that's it, man. The professor and the pastor.
P and the P out.
Sign out.
All right.
See you later.